Hi everybody. Today's lesson's about GMOs. Yesterday we talked about selective breeding. One of the problems with selective breeding is that even though you can change crops and improve crops through breeding, you can't introduce brand new traits to crops. However, with GMOs, you do have the ability to introduce brand new traits. GMO stands for Genetically Modified Organism, and this is an organism whose DNA has been purposely changed in a laboratory. So, there's plenty of examples of genetically modified crops that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. One example is BT corn. Right? BT corn is a corn that contains a gene from a bacteria. Right? This bacteria gene allows the corn to produce its very own insecticide. So normally when farmers grow the corn, they have to spray their crops with lots of pesticides to kill the insects, and these pesticides are harmful to the environment. But now with BT corn, the farmer goes out, buys these special seeds, they grow the crop, they don't have to spray any pesticides in the environment, because as soon as the insect bites into that corn crop, the insect dies because the corn produces its own pesticide. Now, this might seem great for the farmer because it makes it so much easier to grow the corn. You don't have to go out and spray and waste your time. You don't have to go out and waste your money buying these pesticides or insecticides. However, there are people that consume the corn that aren't so thrilled about it. They're a little bit concerned, and the concern is, well, if one bite of this corn kills an insect, what happens to a human after a lifetime of eating, this type of corn? Is it really safe? Another example of a genetically modified crop is Roundup Ready soy. And this is actually one of the first genetically modified crops that was available for farmers to grow. Right? And it allows the farmers to spray their entire fields with this very, very popular herbicide called Roundup. It's just meant to kill the weeds. But here you can spray the entire field with it. All the weeds will die, but the soybeans has this gene that makes them resistant to this chemical, so they're able to grow despite being sprayed with this herbicide Roundup. Okay? It just makes the farming process a bit easier. And then finally we have golden rice. Golden rice is actually a type of rice that contains genes from many other plants to enhance or enrich the amount of vitamins and nutrients that are inside of rice. Right? So it's just meant to kind of provide more nutrients and some of the hunger that exists in parts of the world. If we look at some of the pros and cons of GMOs, this is actually a very controversial topic. So some of the good things about GMOs on the pro side, we have that farmers can produce disease-resistant crops. Okay? Well, you can also use less chemicals, like in the case of the BT corn. We don't have to use the insecticides. We can produce crops that grow in poor soil, so we're not using as much fertilizers, which is harmful for our water system. And with golden rice, we can produce more nutritious crops and feed more people. However, not everybody thinks that GMOs are the greatest things. That's because there are some problems with GMOs. One of the problems is that the pollen produced by these GMOs spreads these enhanced genes to unwanted plants. So what ends up happening is that we put the gene for Roundup resistance in the soybeans, but it doesn't necessarily stay in the soybeans. It can spread over to the weeds. So now we have what we call super weeds that can't be killed by normal chemicals. Also, the long-term health effects are largely unknown with these genetically modified crops. Right? We know that they're safe to eat for a couple of years because, we started eating these things in the early 2000s. However, we don't know if they're safe to eat over a lifetime because they haven't been around for a lifetime. So the long-term health effects of these crops are unknown, and that's one of the biggest reasons why people are so unsure. In the United States, it's difficult to determine if you're eating genetically modified crops or not because we don't label our foods as being genetically modified. In fact, if you want to avoid eating genetically modified crops, You have to look for the label that says either non-GMO or organic. Are the two things I'll tell you if it's not genetically modified. Alright guys, that's it for today's lesson. Thank you.